to Matauri Bay in the late 80s, entering the fishing and tourism industries. But in 1996, Parliament called. Samuel stood in Te Tai Tokerau, and while he didn't win the seat, he was elected on the Labour list. What was it like for you? You were 57 when you stepped into this place. Was it overwhelming?
Well, I'm listening to Rawiri the other day with his potai on talking about no wonder he can understand how Pākehā feels when they step into the marae. Well, I think the Pākehā was scared to step into the marae because he might have thought that he was going to be put into a hangi. Well, that didn't happen to me here. That didn't happen to me here because I was a senior vice president of the Labour Party for some years. We were told when you came into the House, keep your mouth shut, open your taringas, open your ears. Do that for 3 years and you do your apprentice, and hopefully after the next 3 years you'll be able to put practical policies into place to help your people. So that was my indoctrination as a member of Parliament in the opposition at that time. But I go back to the early times whereby we certainly had some big movers and shakers in the Labour Party. I mean, we were involved in changing circumstances. We had people like Pat Kelly, we had you know, the trade union, and then all of a sudden we had the Messiah, we had Winston rise. With him, took all the Maori seats, and we were pretty pohara. We were very thin on the ground. In fact, the Maori Policy Council, we couldn't even get a bloody quorum. We couldn't get a quorum to have our meetings at the conference. So this is how it was at the time. The landscape was very barren and there was very little support. But we carried on. And slowly but surely, we began to gain the support and the confidence, not just of Māori, of our people. And of course, the Labour Party has always had a very close relationship with Ratana, beginning of the four winds, when we originally had the 4 Māori members of Parliament. And that's where it all started, but then Labour started to gain traction in terms of the wider public support from the electorate. But it culminated in a lot of warfare between different personalities.
What was your relationship with Helen Clark like?
Very professional, iron lady. She was a professional politician. There's no doubt about that. She was unique, but she certainly polarised people, not only people within the government, but people outside. She was very avid in her vision for where Labour should go, and if you didn't concur with that, well, you were on the sideline.
I imagine she leaned on you for cultural guidance, you know, when you're at Waitangi and places like that. Do you recall the moment in that whare when she was reduced to tears? Well, I think that, unfortunately, she sort of blamed me for that, in that I gave her the word that I got, the commitment I got from the taumata kaumatua, or that marae, which I had called a meeting with on a number of occasions, knowing that Tita Whai would be there and you know, and being the matriarch of Ngāpuhi, if things didn't go her way, she'd get up and do the haka. Now, they had, even King Tauroa was there. And even though that they gave me their commitment, collectively, as soon as Tita Whai got up, they all surrendered. Right? They ran like hell. And all of a sudden, we've got the Prime Minister being challenged by Tita Whai in terms of the kawa of the marae, and yet the Ngāpuhi elders and the kaumata have given me their assurance. And of course, when it all erupted, and I don't blame the Prime Minister, I don't blame Helen for making burst into tears, you know, with that kind of performance from Tita Whai, and the non-interference by those kaumata who say that they have the authority to be able to sit the kawa for the marae. But looking back, perhaps I should never have taken their confidence and extended that opportunity to Helen at that time.
A year after the Waitangi incident, Labour won the 1999 general election, with Samuels unseating Tau Henare in Te Taitokirau. You became the 39th Minister for Māori Affairs. What was that like? Was that one of your proudest moments?
It was the greatest challenge in my life.
What did you set out? What was your plan?
Well, one of the first things that I wanted to do was to reintroduce the trade training. Because I remember the Maori trade training program, and many of our young people were trained as carpenters. And at that time, there were very, very few initiatives in terms of trade training. But it didn't fly, simply because it didn't have the social welfare or the work and income logo to it. This was the Maori Battalion trade training program. So I was disappointed in that. The other aspect of the policy that I initiated was papakainga housing. And an example of that is Tākau Bay now. We've got Ngāti Reo here where they've got papakainga because of the difficulties that we had of getting finance. And the raruraru in regard to the utilisation of multiple old Māori land. And sometimes it's our own fault, even though there is funds available for the establishment. And I'm confident that that will still roll out, especially now in these times of housing shortages and unaffordability of houses for our people, especially in the regions.
So you could see a housing issue way back then?
Absolutely. I took the select committee and we travelled to Taitokoro, starting with the Uriahau, Waikaupura, right up to the far north, and had a look at the shambles and the shanties, and they're still there now. They're still there now. It's the same thing. It's still there now. There are two aspects of it. To me, the release of land for Māori housing through the Māori Land Court and the status of Māori land, it's got to change. It's got to be made easier. You talk about changes to the RMA, there's got to be changes to the Whenua Act also. Get rid of the bureaucracy. And for those people, if they've got enough tika, shares of land, let them build their house there and get on with it. And the other one, of course, is the establishment of the Māori television. And I've got to take my hat off to the Minister for Ngāti Hina, Tau Henare. He was the one who actually initiated that. I picked it up with Helen Clark and then handed it on to Parakura. Because, oh, the Māori TV, here we go again. Just like Māori constituency electorates. We want to fund these Maoris because they want to be on television. So there was arguments, interesting conversations for that alone. But I've got to hand it to Tau. He was the architect of it, and we carried it on.
Just a year into his tenure, Samuels was forced to resign his ministerial posts when he became the subject of a police investigation into alleged historical sex crimes. Police found there was insufficient evidence, but Samuels never regained his Māori affairs portfolio.
And the architect that initiated that, we all know, was Richard Prebble. Sometimes I regret, and I'm not smacking him between the eyes when we were not giving him an uppercut, if you like, but there it is. I was a vulnerable target without any